Hello, everybody. This is what your pastor didn't tell you. You probably weren't expecting me, but Zach's a little busy right now. Today, we're going through another article by Dr. Michael Heiser on if Romans 5:12 is good justification for original sin. Last video was on animal death before the fall, and our conclusion was the answer is no, it's not justified by Romans 5:12. Anyways, here's the program. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to like and subscribe. Could really help my boy Zach out. Anyways, peace. He says, time to get back to Romans 5:12. My first complaint about the misuse of the passage concerned how creationists of the literal 24-hour day variety use this verse to argue against the possibility of any death before the fall. This in turn is used to argue against the fossil record, any view of creation that argues for a very ancient earth. In this installment, we start into the heart of some serious theological issues. Let's get started with Millard Erickson. All of us, apparently without exception, are sinners. By this we mean not merely that all of us sin, but that we all have a depraved or corrupted nature, which so inclines us towards sin that is virtually inevitable. How can this be? Well, what is the basis of this amazing fact? Must not some common factor be at work in all of us? It is as if some antecedent or a priori factor in life leads us to a universal sinning and universal depravity. But what is this common factor that is often referred to as original sin? Whence is it derived, and how is it transmitted or communicated? We find the answer in Romans 5. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men, because all sinned. This thought is repeated in several different ways in the succeeding verses. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, the judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation. For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, consequently, just as the result of one trespass was condemnation for all men, for just as through the disobedience of the one man the many were made sinners, Paul sees some sort of causal connection between what Adam did and the sinfulness of all people throughout all time. But just what is the nature of this influence exerted by Adam upon all humans, and by what means does it operate? Heiser notes later, he continues. The approach that sees Adam's connection with us in terms of a federal headship is generally related to the creationist view of the origin of the soul. So this is not the young earth creationist view. This is a different idea of whether the soul originates and when it does. This is the view that humans receive their physical nature by inheritance from their parents, but that the soul is specially created by God for each individual and united with the body at birth, or some other suitable moment. Thus, we were not present psychologically or spiritually in any of our ancestors, including Adam. Adam, however, was our representative. God ordained that Adam should act not only on his own behalf, but also on our behalf, so that the consequences of his actions have been passed to his descendants as well. Adam was on probation for all of us, as it were, and because Adam sinned, all of us are treated as guilty and corrupted. Oof. Yeah, Heiser's not going to agree with that one at all. He says, the other major approach sees Adam's connection with us in terms of a natural or realistic headship. This approach is related to the traducianist view of the origin of the soul, according to which we receive our souls by transmission from our parents, just as we do our physical natures. So we were present in germinal or seminal form in our ancestors. In a very real sense, we were there in Adam. His action was not merely that of one isolated individual, but of the entire human race. Although we were not there individually, we were nonetheless there. The human race sinned as a whole. Thus, there is nothing unfair or improper about our receiving a corrupted nature and a guilt from Adam. For we are receiving the just result of our sin. This is the view of Augustine. So this is like a bit much. I mean, seminal or germinal form in our ancestors, like obviously that's kind of crazy. So Heiser's
saying, my question is, to start the ball rolling, is simple. If all humans since Adam inherited Adam's guilt, however that happens, then why does Jesus get off the hook? That's a good one. He is 100% human in biblical theology. His genealogy goes straight back to Adam. Now I know what the standard answers are. Oh, Jesus was God, so he didn't have original sin. This avoids the question. It doesn't answer it. He was also 100% human. To deny that is to deny the incarnation. It wouldn't be real or actual incarnation then. How about he was virgin born, and we all know that sin is transmitted through the male after all. Jesus is compared to Adam in Romans 5, not Eve. Also evasive and poorly thought through. Ouch. I would hope it's clear that all women are also sinners and having original sin. Mary was a woman and she was the mother of Jesus. There is also no verse in the Bible that says sin is transmitted through only males. Another problem. So, if we cloned a woman and implanted that clone in another woman, would it be sinless since there was no male father? Of course not. To be human is to be under the curse of Adam. But this is a modern illustration of the same logic as theologians use to get Jesus off the hook. He says to stiff arm Romans 5:12 when it comes to Jesus. The problem is straightforward. We either assume the full humanity of Jesus or we don't. The full humanity of Jesus, laid out so clearly and repeatedly in the New Testament, isn't what's causing the original sin problem with him. It's the way we understand original sin and misuse in Romans 5:12. So this is a great example of what happens when you take a passage, you come to a conclusion on it, probably based off of, your parents or your pastor or just whatever tradition you grew up in. And then you encounter a problem. The question is not, oh, how do I make this work with my view? The question should be, my original thought should be, is my idea of original sin correct? And should I change that? Or should I have to help that not contradict other ideas, specifically in regards to Jesus's sin nature, or lack thereof at least? I could add that, isn't it curious how nowhere else in the Old Testament do we see any writer looking back to Genesis 3 as an explanation for the transmission of sin to all humankind? Kind of curious, to say the least. And there's yet another problem. How is it that we get hard-nosed about all humans being infected by the sin of the first Adam, but we want to qualify the effect of the sacrifice of the second Adam? You know why? We want to avoid universalism. Oh, he's got a nice little article on universalism, so maybe we'll talk about that one. Although he's not a universalist. He says, but then what do we do with Romans 5:18? It says, therefore, as one trespass led to condemnation for all, so one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. And to compound the problem, does Paul contradict himself in the very next verse? He says, for as by the one man's disobedience, the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience, the many will be made righteous. He says, many? I thought all were made sinners by one man. Adam, huh? He says, you may not have reflected on it before, but these problems stem from the traditional view of Romans 5:12 articulated by Erickson and countless others. My view is that it's a transmitted tradition, mostly due to the influence of Catholicism, which have been taken up by Protestantism, and people have not thought about it for centuries, being content with the answers to the problems that really aren't answers. He says, I have a solution to this issue, not original to me, but a bit nuanced, but it involves a completely different take, one that is distinctly ancient and Near Eastern in approach. There I go again, contextualizing the Old Testament. He says, before I get into that, I'd like to see what you're thinking about this first post. So, it's really funny that, back then when Heiser wasn't as popular, he had this following and he really interacted with the posts that we made and, the commenters, 33 comments. That's a lot of stuff here. So what do you guys think about that? That was really fascinating. You have the idea of Augustine spelled out, really weird, honestly. My first thought, reading it in detail. So, yeah, I mean, do you think Heiser missed anything? Do you think that we are Do you think we actually do inherit this original sin? Do you think we're guilty from birth? I would assume that you don't think that it's a seminal thing, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. This is part 2. This is going to be the end of it. I hope you guys are ready for the next one, where we continue this and see Dr. Heiser's thoughts.